Hello, guys. Welcome to this episode of the Transfer Portal CFB YouTube and podcast. We are joined today by 24/7 Sports and CBS Sports Evan Flood. Evan, how you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me. Just not exactly the week I thought I was going to have, but
it's
makes things interesting.
Pretty much eventful for everyone from the Badger State. Before we go ahead, I mean, based on my hoodie, based on the Wisconsin accents that we got going on right now, why don't you go ahead and just tell the viewers a bit about what you do and what you cover exactly?
Yeah, so I cover Wisconsin football and basketball for 24/7 Sports or CBS Sports now. Had a mostly recruiting emphasis when I was younger, but now we've since we've been bought by CBS Sports, been kind of focused more on the team stuff. So kind of a 50-50 split there, but kind of balance between sort of I don't like to call myself a beat writer, but sort of a insider type, opinion type, but obviously I cover the team on a daily basis as well. So I kind of try and do a little bit of everything.
Cool. So let's go ahead. Let's just go right into it. Obviously, I feel like it's not just the Wisconsin world, the college football world in general was in shock when it came out Sunday afternoon that Paul Chryst was relieved of his duties from head coach of the Wisconsin Badgers. Can you talk about what I'm not gonna say how the news got to you, but what was your reaction when the news first came out? Was it something that you felt like was coming, or did it just complete bombshell?
A little of both. I mean, I think after Illinois, even the biggest homer could see that something wasn't right in that program. I mean, you can't run for 2 yards against an inferior Big Ten West opponent and not think that something is wrong. And, at least in my lifetime, that's as bad of a performance from a Wisconsin team as I've ever seen. Obviously, things have kind of been slowly going downhill since, really 2020, some would argue 2018. So it didn't shock me in the sense that Wisconsin finally made a move. It did shock me that they did it after 5 games, because that's so anti-Wisconsin. They haven't fired a football coach in 30 years. I think the last time they fired an assistant even was 2012. And that was midseason as well when I forget who the Mike Markuson, the offensive line coach, was let go, I think, after 3 games, and Wisconsin went with Bart Miller. So you're talking about Paul Chryst, who's one of their own, like a lot of, fans out there, bleeds Cardinal and white, spent pretty much his whole life in the state, played for the program, was a longtime assistant for the program. So you didn't think they would do him in that way after just 5 games. I mean, after Illinois, you're starting to think, okay, a firing after the season has now become very, very real. But after 5 games to do that to somebody who's, one of your own, I was shocked that they were able to do it in the middle of the season like that, because I do think, at least in the short term, it's going to have ramifications for that team that's already struggling.
Do you think it's mainly just been, downward spiral? It's like you said, some will say 2018, that was a horrendous season. I remember watching that BYU game, and that was Wisconsin's first non-conference home loss, and I forgot God knows how many years. 2020 was COVID. You kind of gotta take that maybe a little bit with a grain of salt, but everybody had to deal with COVID. Last year I feel like they had some really big Rose Bowl hype that obviously did not happen whatsoever. And this year, I think anybody that even followed the team closely knew that they had to replace a lot in the front 7. They essentially had to go in with a brand new secondary. But I feel like that this is something more than just on-field performance. I think I'm not saying that there's something behind the locker room that not every fan knows, but I think if you start to look at some other, recruiting aspects, the Jesse Temple for the Athletic, he came out saying that they've gone 8 years without a recruiting faculty. They brought in a recruit during one of their games last year, and he literally didn't talk to anybody on the coaching staff the whole year. Billy Schrouth, who was St. Mary Springs recruit from Fond du Lac, from my hometown, actually going from Fond du Lac and now he's going to Notre Dame. Do you feel like recruiting is kind of like got a lot to do with it? Wisconsin's obviously never been a top 25 recruiter in the country, but it feels like some grips have really been slowing down on their end. In-state recruits are even going to the likes of Ohio State. Is it more than just on-field performance, or like what else do you see that could have led to this event?
Yeah, so I mean, we did break the Jimmy Roller story last year when he was here, and that lack of recruiting department. Listen, I mean, people who follow the site and read the message board religiously know I'm not overly concerned with who's in your recruiting department. My stance has always been I just need someone to do the job. It doesn't matter for the most part who it is, but you saw the ramifications right there when you don't do your job, because Wisconsin was his dream school. He comes in there, goes in and out of campus, and nobody knew he was there. And by the time he blew up, he kind of gave Wisconsin the double bird and said, see you later. He gave him a courtesy visit in the end, but, it didn't matter at that point. So there was a lack of attention to detail from that standpoint. And, you can get by if the coaches are going to go out there and pick up the slack, but nobody was picking up the slack, which was a big problem. And then you can even look in 2023 right now. I mean, they just made a new offer today. It was so, kudos to them, but we're going on like 3-4 months. They haven't done anything. I mean, there was like 1 or 2 offers out there. They still don't have a quarterback offer. I mean, we're talking about the most important position in sports, at least not that we know of. There's not one out there. Yeah, you always got to leave it to there's always a chance, they're working on a committed guy and they're just keeping it, under wraps. So you got to leave that open to possibility. But, we're in October now, and you still don't have any consistent quarterback play in your entire program or anything you can take to the bank right now. And they've been sitting on that for months on end. And so this whole recruiting cycle just is kind of stopped here in 2023 over the last several months. And that makes you wonder, how much of a commitment there was to that too. And then the Billy Schrath thing, that's kind of when my ears really started to perk up, because to be honest, now it's recruiting. A lot of people say a lot of different things, and, not everything I get thrown my way is going to be true. But from what I'm told, he was committed to Wisconsin and never came out public with that, which allowed Notre Dame to keep working at it. And, I kept asking my sources, at what point do you get worried that you're going to lose him? Because Notre Dame's coming in for in-home visits. He's continuing to visit Notre Dame, and there just was a nonchalant attitude about it. From the context I talked to. And that's when I really started to feel like, okay, we're talking about a 4-star kid from your backyard. I get it. It's an offensive lineman, and generally, you lose a big recruit, you're going to get one the next year, and that's the way they've been going. But, your program's not, as consistent as they've been. The program, as we've seen this year, you're not immune to just letting kids like that leave the border and not put up the fight that you should. I mean, you're not good enough to get away with not doing the little things. And, that recruitment, I think, was a big chink in Chris' armor to be able to hang around here, because it's one that he had done.
Now, kind of going back to what you're saying about the quarterback, inconsistencies, and not just that, does it also, in terms of making this decision, do you think Graham Mertz's play had something to do with this? Because this is a quarterback that's been in the program now for 4 years, since after the 2018 high school season. I was at his All-American game in San Antonio, where he won MVP after throwing 5 touchdowns, and he was on the same team as Sam Howell. One of these guys is in the NFL, and the other guy is still finding his footing. It's kind of been my big thing. I mean, because when you got a quarterback-oriented minded coach who's given us some of the best quarterbacks in Wisconsin with Tolzien and Russell Wilson, you look at Graham Mertz and it's like, I can't really say that he's been better than ever since he came to campus.
Yeah. I don't know if I connect that dot, only because Mertz has actually looked kind of good this year. And for the first time in his career, I don't point the finger and say, this is the guy holding the team back. I think if anything, he's kind of kept them afloat. I mean, they put him in so many bad positions, these days with penalties. and kind of put him behind the sticks. And, he's often bailing them out on 3rd and long. So I don't know if I necessarily draw that parallel. Obviously, there's something to it because, Chryst is supposed to be the quarterback whisperer, right? Ever since Russell Wilson, the thought was if you can get him an upper level talent or even just a slightly above average quarterback, it's going to take Wisconsin to the next level. I mean, look at Scott Tolzien. I don't know if there was anything special about the way he threw the ball. He just made good decisions, made timely throws, didn't turn the ball over. And Wisconsin was able to win the Big Ten with that guy. And then you look at a guy like Mertz, who I think we can all see it, has all the talent. I mean, he'll make throws that you're just like, wow, I have not seen those type of throws since Russell Wilson. And then, but the consistency, has never been there with him. And I think he's a guy that, mentally, especially if you sack him early, that can throw him off for the rest of the game. Although I will say, I think this season he's been better at bouncing back from adversity. Just, some things have gone wrong. A lot of things have gone wrong for his offense this season. It hasn't necessarily affected him through 4 quarters like it has. I think the bigger problem is, I think like we talked about recruiting. I mean, we know how good this program can be if you just get them average to above average quarterback play. And if you get a Graham Mertz, fine. He was highly touted, had all the offers you could ever imagine. You take one, but you should have kept going because, if Mertz gets hurt, you have a major problem on your team right now. And if he leaves, you have a major problem. I don't know why they haven't tried to go after 2, knowing you're taking a shot in the dark on most of these guys anyway, and they're under the radar. Why not try and hit the jackpot and sort of double your odds? I would like, you can say what you want about Mertz, but I think, the core of your problem is not putting more of an emphasis on trying to get more competition in that room. And again, if you hit and you really believe you got a guy that's a game changer for you, fine, you can stop. But, most of the time it has not been the case. You've been working with plan B and plan C guys.
I mean, I do got to give the recruiting, whoever's making the offers, I do got to give them some credit because they did give Mabry Matauer offer here at the Woodlands where I'm at here in Houston, and that was a big, I keep tabs a little bit on him. He's a really good player for Woodlands. I would really like this. Actually, I don't even think he's got an official offer yet. I think he's only visited, to be honest. But if they can extend an offer to him, I think it'd be great for the program. But something else that I kind of want to go on is, do you think Chris McIntosh has instilled a new culture in Madison? We've obviously got USC, UCLA coming in next year. And I saw someone compare it to the SEC, where this is going to be a much more of a cutthroat business now. Do you think there's more to it than just that? Or do you feel like Wisconsin's just trying to weigh their options as much as they can until the end of the season?
Yeah, I don't think Wisconsin's ever going to be as cutthroat, as some of these upper tier programs, right? But I do understand why this decision doesn't sit well with a lot of, national media and a lot of other head coaches across college football, because, like I said, if Wisconsin can make a decision like that to a guy who's one of their own, anybody could do it. And, I could see a guy like Kirk Ferentz being really uneasy right now, who's got a a lesser track record than Chryst does for the most part. Pat Fitzgerald as well at Northwestern, and they're building an $800 million stadium. What's their incentive to keep him around anymore if a school like Wisconsin's able to make that move? But, from what I heard, I think the message that Chris McIntosh really wanted to portray, and I don't think this is something that gets done in the short term, but long term, I think it will benefit this program, is that being content, being stagnant, being accepting mediocrity is no longer acceptable at Wisconsin, right? 2017, they're on the cusp, like not saying they're going to, knock off Clemson's, Alabama's in that, but, you could kind of taste it, right? This program was flirting with being in the college football playoffs semi-regularly. And then you go back to recruiting. You kind of stop pushing and I think really creating competition, and some of the hirings Chryst made too were very questionable. They didn't make a lot of sense, and he felt like Wisconsin could always do better. And so from what I'm told, that's the message that McIntosh really wanted to get across, that we are committed to winning. We are committed to getting there. And if you're going to continue to do things the same old way, we're going to find a coach that can bring us there. As far as the timing and, what that means for everybody else, I think I've made it pretty clear. I think this is Jim Leonhard's job to lose. I don't think they make that move without Leonhard attached. I think they fully believe in him and fully expect him to run with this job and carry it forward. How long that's going to take to pick up the pieces in the locker room is TBD. But I think it's everyone's hope that he is the coach in 2023. And I think it would take a lot to knock him out of there. It would have to be blatantly obvious that he's in over his head, or maybe he just doesn't want it. I mean, Jim Leonhard's not exactly a guy that loves all the attention. I think you got to keep that in mind, that maybe this head coaching just isn't for him. I'm sure he's had offers to do it at other lower level schools, and I know he's had some big time offers for defensive coordinator as well and turned them down. How much of that is I just want to stay home, or how much of that is I just I'm only here to help Wisconsin. I don't know, but I don't think you make this move unless you wanted Jim Leonhard to take that job, because they could have done it after the season and done a nationwide search. Instead, you're giving them a 7-game head start over the entire field. And I don't think this point can be reiterated enough. I know I'm giving you a long-winded answer here,
no,
but
good.
I don't think this point can be reiterated enough. I mean, this guy just said a couple of weeks ago how much he hates mid-season firings and the message that it sends. Well, now you just put him in a position he doesn't want to be in. You're making him carry this program on his shoulders and putting a lot of stress on him. Are you really going to slap him in the face and not give him the job after all this? That seems kind of far-fetched to me.
No, I totally got you on this one. And yeah, it's kind of a lot what you're saying about the winning, because I believe the Big Ten West and East Division, I think they came in 2014, I believe it was. And I think it was in the first 4 years they won the Big Ten West 4 times or 3 times. Since then, they have only won it just the one time in 2019. And 2018, 2020, 2021, 2022, we're talking for the last 5 years without a Big Ten West title. That's honestly, that's kind of just more of it's an incurring death sentence. And the kind of what you were saying about the whole midseason firings, if nobody really likes it, how about Braylon Allen, like 15, 20 minutes after this news breaks, he's the first one to take to Twitter and say, anyone who wanted Chryst fired is not a part of this team. The first press conference held by the team after this happened, Nick Herbig is among the first players to defend Chryst, saying that nobody really wanted this, nobody expected this. Do you think that this is, I'm not going to call it PR, but do you feel like players are still going to defend their guy no matter what? No one's going to say that he was terrible, because that's not even true. But do you think that there's like somewhat of maybe that there could still be a rejuvenation among the players? Maybe they could still be more excited to play for a guy like Jim Leonhard, who obviously still has that Wisconsin DNA and has a great relationship with all the players that he coaches.
Yeah, the weirdest part about that press conference was they didn't really go to bat for Jim Leonhard, right? I mean, every question that was about Leonhard got turned into Chryst, and that kind of made my eyebrows go, okay, because I always thought Jim Leonhard was the most liked guy in that program. I mean, usually it's not the head coach. The head coach is usually, kind of the enforcer, right? So, usually it's an assistant that's the most liked guy, but I don't know if that's the dynamics of this team. And, after that press conference, I really wonder where they're at mentally. And I don't know if they're thinking about this, but I got to believe in the back of your mind, and I could be completely off base, but I mean, what do you have in it? If you loved Chryst that much and you hated this decision, which they do, I've said this, I don't think that was I know it wasn't a popular decision in that locker room. And, you don't need to be an insider. All you need to do is be on Twitter and you can see that for yourself. But I know guys were shaken by it and really upset about what happened. But, do you really have the incentive to play that well? Maybe this is a stupid thing to say, but I mean, if you play well, you come out and play with your hair on fire and beat in Northwestern. Don't you kind of validate that decision to let him go? So I wonder where you're at mentally to the point where, yeah, we want to win games. We want to get this thing back around, but we do that. All we do is prove Chris McIntosh right. And, so I think that's an interesting dynamic. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know what they're thinking, but I mean, that's realistically what would happen. Jim Leonhard wins his first game. I don't care if it's against Northwestern. Wisconsin's lost 6 of 7 at Ryan Field. Everyone knows this is the yearly or semi-yearly, bi-yearly trap game every time they have to go to Evanston. So, you win that game, you kind of give, not that Paul Chryst is ever coming back, but, you kind of validate that decision. And I just wonder how up guys are for this game. Because you can see it in their eyes, you can see it in their body language. This isn't something that they're coping well with, and this is not something they're going to get over with in 6 days. I think it's at least another 2 or 3 weeks minimum before Jim Leonhard can really turn that thing around. But who am I to, say Jim Leonhard can't do something? Every time you tell that guy he can't do something, he does it 10 times better than he ever thought he would. So, I hesitate making that prediction going against him.
Top 5 defenses in his first 6. He's been top 5 in total defense 5 times in his first 6 seasons as defensive coordinator of Wisconsin. Obviously, I think this is going to be one of the seasons where it's not, but you know what? I will never judge Jim Leonhard just because I've seen how well he can play against some top teams. Kind of like just to do a little bit of a rapid fire. Let's kind of like just take a game by game, kind of like make it just a quick prediction. You kind of already said it. At Northwestern, this is at Ryan Field. We've interviewed Colin Wilder twice, and both times I think he said how much he's hated Ryan Field because of how slow he plays. How do you? The thing that also gets me is Wisconsin's a 10-point favorite going to this game. What are your thoughts for Wisconsin as they go down to Evanston this Saturday?
Yeah, I don't think they're ready for this, and as bad as Northwestern's look this season, they are still one of those teams that, if you don't buckle up your chin strap and are ready to go into trenches, I mean, they can be physical with you. I haven't liked the physicality of Wisconsin in the trenches this season. On top of that, Northwestern's throwing it a ton, and Wisconsin's pass defense, especially from their linebackers, has not been good. I mean, you can hit Wisconsin, you can dink and duck them up the field. And, I would take Northwestern to win. I would definitely take the points, but I hate saying that because Northwestern's not good at all, but I just don't know where Wisconsin is.
2014 was the same way. I mean, despite starting that loss with LSU, they still looked good, very good up until they played Northwestern. Mm-hmm. They lose that game, and they still make the Big Ten title game. But every time that Northwestern looks bad, and even if Wisconsin's good, Wisconsin still struggles at Ryan Field. I mean, that was the catalyst for the disaster that was 2020. At Michigan State, I mean, are we going to call this the Jalen Berger revenge game, or this is another Big Ten road game?
I'll take Wisconsin in that one. I think Michigan State has bigger problems in terms of putting that team together. And like I said, for Wisconsin, I don't think it's a bad team. I mean, at least on paper, I think a lot of the pieces are there. I just don't think, for whatever reason, they've been putting it together. So, get one headache out of the way at Northwestern, give them time to move on. I think they can go into East Lansing and win, especially against a quarterback that's been really shaky, hasn't even been great at home either. I think that could be the bounce back for Wisconsin.
Yeah, Michigan State's been absolutely awful since they lost to Washington. They also lost to Maryland. They got decimated by Talia. These next couple games, they get really dicey. Versus Purdue back at the camp, I don't know how to take Purdue right now because one week they look awful, and then the next week they look like they did against Minnesota. And I picked Purdue to finish second in the Big Ten West before the season started. I don't know if I regret that decision or not. It just depends on which Aiden O'Connell you're going to get.
Right. Did they beat Minnesota at Minnesota?
Yeah.
Normally I want to say, you start to get late October, they stop throwing the ball as well as they generally do. I just don't know if I trust that Wisconsin secondary against them. My head tells me Purdue. I'll go with my gut and say Wisconsin at home. First game for Jim Leonhard. Yeah, Camp Randall, emotional game. If Wisconsin's lucky, it's very cold and he's throwing a ice block. O'Connell's throwing an ice block around. I'll take the Badgers.
All right, cool. This next week, even dicier versus Maryland at camp. Everything that we just said about Purdue's offense, you might as well put it on steroids with Maryland.
Yeah.
Rakeem Jarrett against this Wisconsin secondary just honestly scares me to death.
Yeah, I don't know if Alexander Smith coming back perhaps changes some things. He's their best corner. And then you can start to put Jay Shaw on the number 2 receiver, Ricardo Hallman on the number 3, Justin Clark on 3, so forth. I think that'll make a difference. That tempo offense with their quarterback, they looked really good at Michigan. I don't know if I see Wisconsin slowing them down. I will take Maryland in that one. I think that's a little bit different animal and a tougher opponent for Wisconsin than Purdue was.
All right. So far we got 2-2 for Leonhard, starting with the Northwestern game. This is going to be ugliest Sickos game of the year at Iowa, November 12th.
Well, if you can score 7, I like your chances against Iowa. I'll take Wisconsin. I mean, they're not even scoring against subpar defenses. I like to think. My only question is, with Leonhard's duties kind of now being split. I mean, are you getting the time you need with that defense to bring them along and get some of these new faces going? I'm guessing he's just going to delegate all of the offense to Bobby Ingram, Bob Bostad, Elvis Whithead, and those guys. So I think that defense will be there come Iowa City. And like you said, that game's going to be about an hour 45 long. It'll be ugly, but I trust Wisconsin more offensively than I do Iowa. And first to 7 wins that one probably.
I will say this. I forgot to mention this earlier when we were talking about Graham's progression for this season, was that the odd thing about Grammer's this season is I don't know who's taking more offensive responsibility between Paul and Bobby Ingram. I would like to believe it was Bobby Ingram because during the Washington State game, we saw so much progression from Graham. I thought he was probably the best player on the team that day. So, I mean, if this is Bobby's full offense now, if he has full control, I mean, we'll see how it looks by the time this Iowa game comes up.
That is something to watch because from what I've heard, things haven't been all that smooth between Ingram, Chryst, and even Bostad as well. The guys that are still trying to figure out how to work together and have different ideas. So you've seen some plays, right, where Wisconsin gets inexplicable delay of games. The players are feeling that rift between the staff. So if you can give it to control the one guy, that may jumpstart things here. So that'll be something to watch going forward because from what I've heard, there's been a lot of confusion going on, in the huddle and the sidelines about getting plays in, who wants what called and when, and who's really running the show here.
It's insane that Bostad and Chryst not being on the same page, considering that they were literally on the same staff for a number of years back in the early days. A team that I really do not feel good about just because of the curse that they place on other teams at Nebraska. I do not know how to take Nebraska right now. I don't know if they're the worst team in the Big Ten West or if Casey Thompson's going to step up with Mickey Joseph now at the helm for Nebraska now.
Yeah, I watched that first game against Northwestern, and I'm like, this is another one where, Wisconsin's going to have to score 28-35 to win that game. I mean, he's so dynamic, and unlike Adrian Martinez, I don't think he kills them in the same way and makes the same boneheaded mistakes in the passing game, which would worry me if I'm Jim Leonhard because, most of the time you could just keep Adrian Martinez, if you kept him in the pocket and made him think, you would win those battles. And, Thompson's a guy that, also when plays break down, I mean, that's almost when he's at his best, when his first option isn't there and he gets to use his feet. Yeah, that one's so hard to pick because, like you said, Nebraska's so Jekyll and Hyde, and they always are. But at the end of the day, I do think you need to score a lot against them. I'm going to take the Huskers, but I don't feel good about it. And, both teams, who's going to show up? I mean, it's hard. Right. It's really hard to tell right now.
No, it really is. It really is. I absolutely hate the fact that game's still being played this year. Let's go with the end of the season. This is probably the hardest game because I don't think anybody truly knows how good this team really is right now based on how bad they looked against Purdue last week. Minnesota.
Yeah. I went into the season going to take Wisconsin no matter what. And I actually thought Minnesota was the best team in the Big Ten West. I didn't predict them to win it just because I knew they had to come back to Madison against a team that was going to be really pissed off. And I thought that was a huge psychological edge. So we're talking about, game 7 for Leonhard. Hiccups should be worked out. Minnesota's the better team. I'm just going to stick with the prediction of Wisconsin being ticked off, thinking about them playing jump around on at Huntington Bank Stadium last year. Maybe wanting to win one. Bowl game could be on the line. I mean, who knows what Minnesota's playing for. Gophers are the better team right now by far, but I'll just stick with having the psychological edge, being at home, and the players likely playing for a bowl game.
So if we go off of these predictions, that would have them go 4-3 in Leonhard's season for the rest of the year. That would make it 6-6 for the Wisconsin team at the end of the year. Do you believe that would be, I don't know if success is the right word because this is a really, really hard schedule for the team that, I think Leonhard's been somewhat thrown a bit of a flamethrower at this point. Do you think if they go 6-6, take back the axe, still make a bowl game, emotions obviously high for Leonhard. Do you think players would be satisfied in either McIntosh?
Yeah. I mean, if he takes back the axe, I think that alone in itself is probably enough. Just because I'm assuming that's going to be a ranked Minnesota team. You ended on such a high note. I mean, everyone asked me what record he has to put together. I really don't think it's about the record. I mean, obviously 0-7, 1-6 would not be great. Even 2-5, I think you leave that door open. But really what he needs to do is get Wisconsin back to playing Wisconsin football, right? You had this identity for so long that was almost iconic. You played the Badgers, it was going to be 60-minute fist fight. You weren't going to out-tough them. You weren't going to out-physical them. They were going to be the more disciplined team. They weren't going to shoot themselves in the foot. If you beat Wisconsin, you were going to earn it. And they haven't been that team in a long time. It's not this year. I mean, you could see parts of it in 2021, almost none of it in 2020. But, like you said earlier, I don't know how much you make of that whole year when, quarter your lineups out at every game and you're dealing with guys being isolated the whole season. I don't choose to count it, but it's been a long time since we've seen that identity. If you can start to get these players to show that again and be dominant in the trenches, I mean, we're talking about the Big Ten West here. Wisconsin on paper is still good enough to hand the ball off to Braylon Allen and beat 75% of the teams on their schedule. They haven't been that this year. If you can get that identity or at least have it start to show up a little bit, I think that'll give McIntosh the confidence to give him the job. And I mean, I think by university law or Wisconsin law, they got to open it up anyway. But if you bring that identity back, I mean, I don't see them moving off Leonhard.
Cool. So I only have a minute left on this Zoom call right now. So let's end this up real quick. Evan, thank you so much for joining me and for giving us great Wisconsin insight and giving us a really good view on how it looks for this season. Guys, make sure you follow Evan at Evan_Flood. Check out his stuff on 24/7. Really good stuff. I highly recommend it. I keep up with it every weekend. He's the man. Evan, once again, man, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Appreciate it.